Walking in Britain can be a bit of a mixed bag. If you're in the countryside, you'll have loads of places where it's really easy to just go and have a nice stroll and get a bit of peace and quiet. But in cities, you're often stuck walking next to noisy cars and busy roads, which is not as nice. But what if you were building a city from scratch? You could design this problem away. You could just make sure that cars and pedestrians are always kept completely separate. It sounds like a futuristic idea, but it's actually already been done in Britain, in a place called Milton Keynes.
After World War II, Britain had a housing crisis, and the government decided to start building brand new towns. This meant they could completely rethink how a town should work for the modern world. After building about a dozen of these new towns, the government saw an opportunity to go even bigger. This is a map of the railways between London and Birmingham, and this is a map of the motorways between London and Birmingham. In the middle here, there's a part where both of those networks line up for a bit. This was one of the best connected parts of the country, and it was currently providing an amazing service to a few small villages and a load of fields. So the government stole the name of one of those villages and declared that the whole area was going to be a new city. But how do you build a new city? Well, to answer that, the planners came up with a plan. At the time, cities were seen as even more dirty and overcrowded than they are today.
These days, you probably wouldn't put a coal power plant in the middle of a major British city and just let it pump out fumes for everyone, but that is exactly what London's Battersea Power Station used to do.
With Milton Keynes, the planners wanted to combine the best of the countryside with the best of the city. So large parts of the city were left green, with plenty of parks and trees to go around. To keep traffic flowing, a grid of dedicated roads was laid out, each about 1 kilometre apart. This means drivers and buses can zoom around the city without having much to slow them down. And pedestrians are catered for as well, because they have their own network of walking and cycling paths called redways. Sometimes these run alongside the roads, but other times they're completely separate, and they can let you navigate from grid square to grid square without really seeing any cars. The planning of the individual grid squares was left open to different approaches. Some of the first ones to be built used a grid system of their own, but most of the later ones ended up going for a more free-form design. On paper, this all sounds like it might be a good idea, but in reality, Milton Keynes is known as a very car-heavy place, and it's often described as lacking any soul. Walking and cycling are options, but it's clear that for journeys across the city, the planners intended that most people would get into their car and drive. But what if you don't? I wanted to find out what it's like to walk across a British city without meeting any cars, so I mapped out a route that would take me from one side of the city to the other, a distance of about 17 kilometres, using only the pedestrian walking paths. Joining me on the journey was urban planning YouTuber CityEd. I was hoping he could shed some light on the thinking behind the design, and maybe help me to understand how we would build it differently if we were doing it today.
So this, I believe, is the edge of Milton Keynes. I think it's a bit debatable because there's like different limits of where people say Milton Keynes starts and ends, but what I decided was this is Newport Pagnell, and once we cross under this little bridge here, this will be Milton Keynes. So cool. We've got a lot of walking ahead of us.
Welcome to Milton Keynes, yeah. So Milton Keynes was founded in 1967, so that's quite late for the new town movement. A lot of these new towns were planned really from 1945 onwards. Milton Keynes had 10, 15 years of lessons learned from those towns.
That's interesting because it feels like we're coming at this from the perspective of, well, we've got 50 years of more progress and we've learned more about urban planning since Milton Keynes was built, but actually they were also they were also looking back and saying, well, we can beat what they did.
They were, yeah.
Yeah. So here's the first time we actually have to cross a road here.
Okay, yeah. I don't know how much you want to talk about road design, but...
Yeah, what you got?
They've kind of made it very, very narrow, and they've obviously used this as a speed bump, but it means that it's a level crossing basically, so if you're in a wheelchair or something you can just go across a lot easier.
Yeah, that's true. You don't actually have to step down onto the road and then keep going. See, I wouldn't even have noticed that. I'd have just walked right across it.
At this point it still felt like we were in the middle of nowhere, but we were starting to get further into the city. It didn't really look like that yet, but there was one clue.
We're starting to see what I think is one of the problems of Milton Keynes, which is that it is almost impossible to escape the constant sound of the road.
I've noticed that.
Because of the way they laid it out with a grid of roads, you're never more than half a kilometre away from a busy road.
We took a minute to walk up to a bus stop because this was one of our only chances to get a good look at the grid roads where cars drive around the city.
This is one of the big roads that cars use to get through Milton Keynes. I mean, this is also very leafy, to be fair.
It is.
All right, let's get back to our segregated pedestrian path. Leave the cars to their business.
But when we got back to the redways, something unexpected happened. we started getting a bit bored.
When you think about walkability, there's actually two aspects to it. There's obviously the pedestrian safety aspect, which Milton Keynes have nailed, but there is another aspect that maybe the urban planners weren't considering, which is to make the walk interesting. We haven't passed a cafe, we haven't passed a shop, we haven't passed anything really that would make me want to do this walk again necessarily.
One of the other problems with the redways is that we still have to get past the grid roads somehow. It's kind of like a reverse bear hunt. We can't go over it, we can't go through it, we'll have to go under it.
This was the ideal in the post-war era, subways and overpasses and things like that, and really separating cars and pedestrians. But then loads of crime took place in the subways and people decided, I don't want to use the subway, I'm going to cross the road at grade, at surface level. And so now road designers moved back towards, actually we'll just have a zebra crossing on the road itself.
We were about to walk through one of the city's ancient woodlands. These were here long before the city was built, and the fact that they were retained is really nice.
I will say my lungs feel clean.
It's just another thing where I'm so conflicted, because on the one hand, we're walking along all these paths and we're complaining about how it doesn't feel like we're being connected with the city.
Yeah.
But also, it's really nice to not be connected with the city.
Exactly.
And as we left the woods, we passed under another grid road and entered the grid square of Connerborough. This was one of the city's earliest residential areas, and it meant that we were finally going to actually be able to see things.
These are kind of the first buildings that we've seen for like an hour.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it?
Because Connerborough is one of the oldest parts of Milton Keynes, it's now considered to be in need of regeneration, but there are some cool things about it. If you live here, you could easily walk a dog in the nearby forest, and children can walk to the city centre without having to cross any busy roads. But the layout here also feels like it's accommodating pedestrians begrudgingly.
I don't feel like we've been prioritised here.
No.
While cars are given their own special highways to zip around the city, as pedestrians, it really feels like I'm walking down a back alley right now.
Yeah, we're sort of sandwiched in between the houses and the road here.
How would you achieve this now?
I think you would make it so that the pedestrian paths are much more integrated into the overall design of the streets. If you had a path like this, you would have much broader sight lines onto it. So these houses would maybe, instead of opening up onto the road on the other side, they would open up onto here. That means that you have people in those houses watching the path, and then that almost keeps it safe in itself, because if you're someone that wants to cause crime, you're not going to do it somewhere where you have a lot of eyes on you.
Connerborough might not be the nicest part of Milton Keynes, but there are still some cool ideas in its design.
This is essentially an extension of your garden. Say you wanted a barbecue with your neighbours, you could come out here and, I don't know, maybe you can have, I don't know, can you have a barbecue here? Whatever. You can be here, maybe you can have a picnic, something with less fire.
I think, as well as having the sort of American feeling of cars being everywhere, it also feels like the zoning system and stuff of America, where you say, well, This is just residential, This is just commercial and stuff. There's a bit of a feeling of that here, I feel like.
There is, you're right. And I think where modern urban planning is moving towards, or I think we're already there to be fair, is this idea of mixed use. Like you can have apartments with a shop on the ground floor, and then you can have, like a park there, and then maybe some businesses and a school. Have it all mixed in so that people can walk to places dead easy.
As we left Connerborough, we were about to encounter one of the most controversial bits of Milton Keynes.
We're now right on the periphery of the city centre, and what we immediately see is that a very, very large portion of the city centre is a car park.
Yes.
The city centre pretty much encapsulates how the lofty ambitions of the planners led to some sadly less than impressive results. They wanted it to be accessible to everyone, they wanted to separate people from cars, and they wanted to avoid the use of dark, tortuous staircases. So what they came up with was a big mall surrounded by ground-level car parks. That does achieve a lot of the goals they had, but it means that there's not really any heart to the city. You don't get a Soho or a Royal Mile here. And yeah, an air-conditioned mall is nice, and it was certainly very busy, but it doesn't quite feel the same. I think this is why people say Milton Keynes feels soulless. As we left the mall and started walking towards the train station, I was reminded of a concept that I've been wanting to talk to Ed about for a while.
Can we, at this point, talk about placemaking?
Sure.
Placemaking is a very important concept in modern urban planning. It developed in response to some of the trends that we see in places like Milton Keynes. The basic idea is that while planners were concentrating very hard on helping people to travel around cities like this, they were forgetting to actually make places that people would want to travel to.
I think placemaking is one of the things where those post-war planners that were trying to get away from what they saw as like the ills of the city, the sort of the crowdedness, the busyness, the dirtiness, in getting rid of all of that, they've actually also accidentally maybe gotten rid of that thing that makes cities special, which is a sense of place.
Fortunately for Milton Keynes, there is some hope. The council recently published a plan that would see this entire road closed to traffic because, after all, there are 2 other roads either side of it. This would open up a big bit of the city centre for new development, and they've suggested turning it into a major walking and cycling route lined with shops and cafes, leading up to a big new outdoor space next to the original mall. The route would even continue beyond the mall and lead all the way to Campbell Park, a really nice bit of Milton Keynes that, unfortunately, we didn't get to see on our visit. Anyway, I'm sure this plan wouldn't be perfect, but it does sound like it would be a lot better than this.
In the same way that we spent so long walking through nature that we actually started to get bored of it.
Yeah.
Now we're starting to get that with this next
I'm quickly getting bored of this type of architecture here as well.
Eventually, we reached the southern end of the city centre, which is home to the Milton Keynes train station.
I can't really see it. Is it trainy?
It's a train station, yeah.
One of the weird things about Milton Keynes is that literally as soon as you leave the city centre, you suddenly drop straight back into quiet suburban streets.
How many other places in the UK do you reckon you can live in a house like that, a 2-minute walk from the main train station? I can't think of anywhere in London.
The remainder of our journey was going to take us through some really nice looking parks, but before we could get there, we had to walk pretty much parallel to the A5, a major road which cuts right through the city.
This is maybe the most comical version of it feels like we're in nature, but we can hear a really loud road.
We were about to head into the residential grid squares of Thurston and Emerson Valley. These parts were built more recently in the 80s and 90s, so I was hoping they would have learned some lessons from the bits that we walked through earlier.
If you had a path like this, you would have much broader sight lines onto it.
And to my relief, they had. These parts are almost like a mirror image of Connerborough. Instead of being crammed into a back alley, we were going right through the middle of the area. Instead of using all this space to make big wide roads for cars to drive on, it was used to make nice big parks dotted with playgrounds.
This feels closer to the dream.
It's lovely. I mean, again, imagine living in these houses and having this park. And it feels like Milton Keynes has a lot of those like incidental green spaces, those like not necessarily a big planned out park, but just places like this that you happen upon just while walking down a path like this. I imagine it's a pretty good place to be a kid, Milton Keynes.
The final stretch took us through another of the city's ancient woodlands and past a new area of the city which is still under construction. As we approached the end of our journey, we reflected on a few things that we'd taken for granted along the way.
We've walked across an entire city today, and we can maybe count on our fingers the number of times we've had to cross a busy road or even seen a car.
Yeah, I don't know if we've ever had to wait for a gap in traffic or anything like that.
No, we've not had to be stood at a pedestrian crossing, pressing a button.
We haven't interacted with a single pedestrian crossing,
we
have
haven't
we, actually?
had to interact with like a single traffic light crossing or anything like that.
That's
We've
so
just dived underneath all of the roads.
I almost can't hear the cars at this point.
No.
They're fading.
Maybe we're just getting used to them. But...
Maybe yeah.
And so after almost 6 hours of walking, we had come to the end of our journey. And after a short scramble through an overgrown country path, we emerged onto what was very clearly the edge of the city.
Well, there we go.
Wow. That is very much representative of the edge of town.
It is. What have we learned?
We've learned that when my legs get to 30k steps, they start to hurt.
Yeah.
Our journey was by no means perfect. There were moments when we felt like the city didn't want us there, and a lot of times when we weren't even sure where the hell we were.
I like a city walk that has like maybe a little cafe here, or then like a row of shops here, and then like a little park here, and I feel like I was missing some of that urban element of walking through a city.
But on the other hand, we did walk across an entire city, and apart from the centre, we barely even noticed.
I don't feel like I've walked across a city necessarily. I feel like I've walked through nature. We've had like a nature walk today, and that's not a bad thing at all, really, when you think about it.
So I think before anyone writes Milton Keynes off as a car-bound relic of the 1960s, they should go out and try getting lost on the Redway network, because if nothing else, it is definitely unique.
I don't know what else to say about it, really.
I think that's it. Bye.
Let's get the hell out of Milton Keynes. Let's stumble our way back.
Yeah.